The number one lesson I learned as a very young military wife was I don't own him. Going into our marriage, I was 19 and he was already in active duty Army, had already been for a year. And the one thing I learned that still serves me today is that I don't own him. And if I could get that across, just this one thing to share with wives now, I would hope you would take it with an open heart and an open mind because I've seen a lot of things, I've experienced a lot of things. This year will be 30 years. And thinking back on the beginning of our marriage, that is probably one of the biggest lessons I learned that still serves me today. And back in the 90s, so we were married in 95, and like I said, he had already been in for a year, and we married in December of 95. And with that came, my moving to where he was stationed. For us, that was in Kansas. And believe me, I tried clicking my heels to go home and it did not work. But anyway, so I moved out to Kansas and no offense, Kansas. You have beautiful sunflowers. As a matter of fact, I plant them here on the farm. Okay, so move out to Kansas, and it's not only a learning experience, it's also a reality check. Like, this is the big leagues, right? So I'm married, moved halfway across the country, and my new husband is active duty in the Army. So this wasn't necessarily a lesson. No one gave me a handbook and said, you don't own him. This was just reflective and figuring out over the years. And it all started in Kansas and very brand new married. So that is one thing I learned. But the reason I learned it was because it didn't matter what we had planned. It didn't matter what he felt. It didn't matter how I felt. None of it mattered if the military called or his CO or whoever. He was a soldier, and that was number one. So he wasn't my husband, he was their soldier, and after that, then he could be my husband. So that was just one of the many lessons having learned as a military wife. Even though it was a very small amount of time for our married life, it was definitely a learning experience on so many different levels. So much of the military, it was about him being their soldier first. And some of the things that would happen, some of the deployments, if you're not military, so deployments, if someone is being deployed overseas, and sometimes their family gets to go and sometimes it doesn't, just keeping things general. And then other times people are almost like domestically deployed. So they, at least we were, I don't know if this is across the board, but they would call it going to go to the field, or going out in the field, which is like a domestic deployment. You don't get to go home. You basically play war, which sounds awful. You play war in the field and you live like you're playing war. And, your family, your wife, your kids, they're all at home and they're living as though you are deployed. And so there was no communication, there was no phone calls. We didn't have cell phones. There was no anything. It was just he's out in the field, quote unquote domestic deployment. And then I would live like he's deployed. And that meant I end up, taking care of the trash and taking care of walking our dog and making sure things are paid, making sure whatever it is, whether we lived on base or not, whatever responsibilities for home were going on, guess who did it? Me. And there were so many times that I would run into some wives and they just left things I don't know why. They would leave things, sometimes very not so nice things, for their husbands to do when they got back. And no, all, all wives did not do that, but I'm just pulling out some examples. And I don't think that it served their marriage to think that, it's a team. You're on the same mission. You just have different jobs. And you have to learn to be okay with it. And you have to learn how to be strengthened by your struggles. And, when things are hard, when you feel alone, when you feel like things are just tough, somehow you work through it. And on the other side of it, you get stronger. And kind of like an exercise, you build those muscles. And then when, my husband would come back, it would be fun again. Not saying I couldn't have fun, but, at the time it was me only and our dog. So we should have named him Toto. Hmm. That's the first time I thought about that. His name was not Toto. His name was Duke. And that was our dog while we were in the Army. So that one lesson in the military, being a military wife for a very small amount of time, has actually served me greatly with him going into medicine. So after the military, go back to South Georgia, do college and beyond. And with all of that, that lesson and that foundation of knowing that I can figure things out, I can figure out who to go to, who to go talk to about certain things. Maybe I didn't understand something. Maybe I needed help on a certain, thing in the military. And there would be a system and there would be people I could go to and there would be other wives that I could talk to, people that are experienced, people that had been in it, for 20 years and I could go talk to them. You know, they were a resource for me. And with that, going into medicine, it served me greatly because the mission of his job was different, but the mission of our marriage was still the same. So I still didn't own him. I kind of took that mentality, I guess, on into med school and on into residency, fellowship, and even uh, you know work after all the training. But he had a job. He had a work mission, and I just made it part of my job to be there to be supportive of him. I didn't put expectations on him, you know, for when he gets home. Okay, well, since you were at work late, I say that, tongue in cheek because he works all the time. And the whole thing with medicine is there is no, I get off at, 5 in, not in our world of medicine. Um, he comes home when the day is done. But I wouldn't leave things for him to do. I had some ideas or maybe that I knew he wanted to do at home. And sometimes I would actually not do them on purpose so that when he did get off, I hadn't already done it when he was looking forward to doing it. So I was mindful of what he was looking forward to on his own. It could have been him talking about building a chicken coop and he would have designed it, or a compost bin or something. Sure, I mean, I could have done it on my own, but then I would have taken out, something he was actually looking forward to. And there was plenty of other things for me to do. There still is. And I still, to this day, I don't see our marriage as one over the other. I don't see one being better than the other. I see it as a team and that we have the same mission. We just have different jobs. And if I could express that to other wives, whether you're military or civilian, it doesn't matter. Maybe the analogy kind of falls into place, whether you're medical or not. There's other jobs that take a lot of your time. And sometimes those jobs, they have a huge impact. And that was one thing that I did try to keep in mind, the mission of his job. What was on the other side of it? What was he dealing with? In the military, we don't know. As a matter of fact, we don't want to know what they have to deal with. And that's why it's probably best to think of how you can be supportive and not try to pull things apart. Like, this is your deal and this is my deal. Just think of it as a team effort. And sometimes you just need to be there to be supportive. I mean, me working as a nurse in the ER, and I have had nowhere near his experiences in medicine. But just having dealt with the things that come into hospitals and emergencies, you know, he didn't need to come home and have me nag him about what he hasn't done. He didn't need me to complain about my day. Yeah, I mean, sure, there's going to be days that maybe it wouldn't be, you know, considered a good day. Maybe I would have considered it a really, really, really bad day. But that doesn't mean I need to lash out at him as if it's his fault or that he owes me something, which he doesn't. He most likely, I'll just speak for our marriage. Yeah, he wants to hear how I did what I did, whatever it is that I would want to talk about. But that doesn't mean that I need to get on, my complaint bandwagon and tell him all the things that he needs to do. Maybe this is why I want to bring this up, because I feel bad for marriages that just don't view marriage as like a team. It's like I'm seeing a lot of things that are distasteful, and it makes me sad, because for us, I married my best friend, and I don't need someone else to be my best friend because I married him. And with that, I mean, that's what he is. Yeah, he's my husband. Yes, I'm his wife, but that doesn't mean that I need to boss him around, you know? And maybe that's my little, I don't know if I would consider it a pet peeve or if it is something that I just really feel like it needs to be known that you don't own him just like he doesn't own you. You want to have the same mission, which is, I'm talking about marriage specifically. You want to have the same mission, but you have to realize that you don't have the exact same jobs. And if we'd focus more on our job rather than what someone else is lacking in their job, then more times than not, they're going to want to pick up their job even more. Okay, so back into the marriage part of my lesson as a military wife served me even into medicine, or my husband going into medicine, and all the way through today and beyond, really. And this year again will be 30 years. So there will be, and there should be, checks and balances. It's not like, there won't be any kind of, I won't say tug of war, but like challenges, just challenges in general. So there'll be checks and balances. There'll be, responsibilities. There'll be accountabilities through marriage. But there should never be a thought or a feeling or even a tone. I will pull that out too. Even a tone of talking to your husband or your spouse, your wife, if you're a guy, that should exude that you are the one that maybe owns them, for lack of a better way of saying this. So, just to recap and touch on this lesson I learned through being a military wife that served me going on 30 years is the whole, just to put it ugly, is I don't own him. And likewise, he doesn't own me. But just knowing that I don't own him, it really is somewhat of a relief because you don't have to control everything he does. I don't have to give him a million honeydew lists. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever given him one. But, that's not to say that he doesn't do things on the homestead. Of course not. He does things all the time whenever he's home. That's what he would love to do, is things on the homestead. But as far as, thinking of marriage, what I would love to get out into the world, even for one person that can just take this in and think of it as like a reflective point on yourself. And I'll, of course, do this on my own too all the time, is just think of your marriage as a team and you have the same mission and you just have different jobs. And you don't own him. You don't have to control him. None of that has to happen. You know, there are some jobs that are more time consuming than other jobs, as far as, going to work and, making a living. But I can go into how I went into being a wife in the medical field with a million youngins. I can go into that another time on how I dealt with it, how I made things work to the best that I could. But this whole military mindset, if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be the person that I am today. I'm not weak. I will say that. I'm not weak. I have high standards. I have very good values, very good ethics. And I'm here to support my husband. And I really hope and pray that other wives learn to take that on as well and be supportive and try not to think of him as something that you need to micromanage. But that's it for today. I'll see you next time.